congregation of over 45,000 people at their Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas, but Joel and Victoria Osteen share their message with millions of people around the world.
Joel Osteen has long stood as one of the most recognizable and polarizing figures in American Christianity. As the senior pastor of Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas, Osteen has cultivated a massive following through his charismatic preaching style, relentless optimism, and a message that blends spirituality with personal empowerment. For decades, he has walked a tightrope of fame and faith, managing to attract millions of followers while simultaneously drawing scrutiny and criticism. So when persistent rumors began to swirl around his ministry, rumors that were brushed aside for years, it became all the more explosive when he finally addressed them head-on. And when he confirmed what so many had speculated, it wasn't just his congregation or the Christian community that reacted, it was the world. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The moment of confirmation arrived not with fanfare, but through a deliberate and calmly delivered announcement that caught nearly everyone off guard. Joel Osteen finally stood before his congregation, before millions watching live, and acknowledged the rumors that had persisted for years. It was a moment years in the making. For so long, Osteen had maintained a carefully curated image, one of positivity, financial prosperity, and divine favor. But beneath that surface, a quiet storm had been building, fueled by whispers, investigative reports, and skeptical voices in both religious and secular circles. When Osteen confirmed the truth, it felt less like the collapse of a secret, and more like the sudden unmasking of a reality that had always been just beneath the surface. The confirmation came not in response to legal demands or investigative pressure, but seemingly from a moment of internal reckoning. It was as though Osteen had reached a point where the burden of perception no longer outweighed the cost of honesty. The crowd sat stunned as he laid bare details that until then had been buried beneath his bright stage lights and soaring worship music. There was no tremble in his voice, no hesitation in his words. He spoke with the same conviction he had used to deliver countless sermons on blessings and breakthroughs. But this time, the message wasn't about overcoming struggle. It was about acknowledging it. What shocked the world wasn't just the content of the confession, but the fact that Osteen had chosen to finally speak the truth himself. It wasn't leaked by a disgruntled former staffer or unearthed by a journalist. It came directly from the man whose face had become a symbol of modern televangelism. For years, the rumors had whispered about financial dealings, personal contradictions, and decisions behind the scenes that didn't quite align with the wholesome image projected to the world. Now, some of those whispers had been turned into thunderclaps of truth, echoing through social media, news outlets, and conversations in living rooms around the globe. There was an immediate shift in the atmosphere following Osteen's announcement, not physically, but culturally, spiritually, and emotionally. People didn't quite know how to react. Some were vindicated, those who had always felt uneasy about the seamless blend of wealth and worship. Others were heartbroken, struggling to reconcile the man they had trusted for decades with the reality now laid bare before them. His confirmation didn't just reshape opinions of him, it shook people's perception of modern Christian leadership itself. Joel Osteen's influence had never been confined to Lakewood Church. His reach extended into countless homes through television broadcasts, best-selling books, social media clips, and national speaking tours. He had become a brand, a beacon of faith-powered success, where belief was often linked to financial abundance and personal happiness. With his admission, however, came a crack in that glittering facade. It invited people to ask deeper questions, not just about him, but about the entire theology he represented. One of the most significant implications of the event was the ripple effect it had on faith communities across the globe. Leaders of other megachurches, prosperity gospel advocates, and spiritual influencers suddenly found themselves under renewed scrutiny. Osteen's confession served as a kind of awakening, both for the faithful and for those who had long criticized what they saw as the commercialization of religion. The carefully drawn lines between spiritual guidance and corporate enterprise began to blur more publicly than ever before. To see a figure like Joel Osteen step down from the pulpit, figuratively or literally, and confirm the long-circulating rumors felt like watching a monument tremble. His ministry had been built on the idea that unwavering belief would always lead to reward. Now, in his honesty, he seemed to suggest that sometimes belief alone wasn't enough to prevent personal compromise or organizational decay. It was a jarring truth for those who had spent years following his teachings, hoping that proximity to his ideology would manifest the same blessings in their own lives. The emotional shock of the revelation reverberated in a way few religious announcements ever do. It wasn't just a man admitting to mistakes or missteps, it was a symbol of unwavering positivity conceding that darkness had been present all along. For many, it felt like a betrayal, but for others, it was an unexpected moment of connection. In his vulnerability, Osteen briefly shed the role of a spiritual celebrity and appeared, if only for a moment, as a flawed human being navigating the same complexities as everyone else. What made the event even more gripping was its lack of theatrics. There were no tears, no fiery apologies, no attempts to shift blame. It was plain spoken, deliberate, and direct. That approach, while unsettling in its calmness, also lent a strange sense of gravity to the moment. It wasn't performative. It wasn't coated in layers of PR-polished language. It was, in a way, chillingly real. As word spread beyond the church walls, the global reaction was swift. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags, opinion threads, and video reactions. News outlets dissected every word of his statement, while commentators debated its implications across ideological lines. Some defended Osteen, citing his courage to finally speak the truth, arguing that years of influence and affluence had allowed him to evade accountability for far too long. The implications were not just spiritual or emotional, they were societal. Osteen's announcement touched on the fragile trust people place in leaders, especially those who claim divine guidance. In a world where institutional skepticism continues to rise, his admission added fuel to the fire of those already wary of religious authority. At the same time, it opened up new conversations about authenticity, redemption, and the role of truth in leadership. For his followers, the confirmation forced a reckoning. They were left to sort through their personal connections to his teachings, to decide whether the message still held weight when the messenger had faltered. For those who had once been skeptical or critical, it felt like a moment of truth long overdue. Yet even in that vindication, there was a strange sense of sorrow. Because when a figure like Joel Osteen confirms the shadows beneath his light, it doesn't just impact him, it casts a long and complex silhouette over the entire landscape of modern faith. And then there were the cultural consequences. Osteen's influence had extended beyond religion into the broader fabric of American life. He had rubbed shoulders with politicians, celebrities, and business moguls. His teachings had found their way into self-help culture, motivational seminars, and wellness retreats. So, when he finally peeled back the curtain, it wasn't just a church that felt it. It was the culture that had embraced his message of living your best life now, that now had to ask whether that life was ever built on solid ground. His announcement also raised difficult questions about the prosperity gospel itself. For years, critics had argued that the ideology equated material wealth with spiritual success, placing undue pressure on believers to measure their faith by their bank accounts. Osteen had always been the face of that movement, well-dressed, smiling, and successful. His confirmation of the rumors didn't just puncture his personal narrative, it challenged the very foundation of a theology that promised heaven on earth if only you believed hard enough. Even more striking was the way his confession reverberated among younger generations. Millennials and Gen Z, already wary of institutional faith, found in this moment further reason to question organized religion's authenticity. The disillusionment wasn't just about Osteen, it was about what he represented. To them, he was a symbol of a church that had grown too corporate, too sanitized, and too disconnected from real struggles. His confirmation of hidden truths seemed to validate every suspicion they had about faith becoming more business than belief. But despite the global scale of the shock, there was something strangely human at the heart of it all. A man, once perceived as nearly untouchable, had admitted to what he had long avoided. It stripped away the illusions and left behind a sobering, perhaps even uncomfortable sense of reality. And in that reality was the realization that even the most charismatic leaders can falter, that even the most polished facades can conceal fractures. There were no immediate promises of restoration or plans for reinvention, no mention of what would come next. And that made the moment all the more powerful. It existed in a kind of suspended animation, a pause in the ongoing narrative of a man who had for so long seemed like a constant. In that stillness, people were left to grapple with their own feelings. Some felt anger, others confusion. Many felt grief. Joel Osteen had finally confirmed what many had long suspected, but in doing so, he did something no one expected. He shifted the conversation about faith, leadership, and vulnerability in ways that will echo for years to come. What had once been mere speculation was now an unavoidable truth, one that would linger in the minds of millions long after the lights of the stage had dimmed and the final words had been spoken. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Joel Osteen's confirmation? What do you think happens next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.